for that next to Sean McVay, so I wouldn't forget Kellen Moore, and I also wouldn't forget Chris Richard, the defensive coordinator of the Cowboys as well. Definitely keep a close eye on him as well. I still think he should have a head coaching job sooner rather than later. And again, do you throw in a Josh Daniels as well? Personally, I don't think so. I reckon the reason he didn't go to the Colts beforehand is because in my opinion, I reckon the Patriots have told him you will get the job once Belichick leaves, but I could be very wrong, and perhaps we'll see him over in Washington. Who knows?
All right, let's break down all your points. Number one, you're dead right. Okay, he's the heir apparent to Bill
I never
Belichick.
even thought of it that way. That is fascinating.
Well, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
I love that idea.
But he will. Okay, item number one. Number two, the Steelers will not fire Mike Tomlin. He has like a 2-year extension. He'll be all right. I actually see this being an 11-game audition for Bill Callahan.
Offensive coordinator.
That's what I think.
Right?
Yeah. And I see this as an 11-game audition. I've seen lots of coaches win the job outright, and I think, what do you got to lose? Okay, if he handles things well and he can win them 4, 5, 6 games with Daniel Snyder, anything is possible. Byron Leftwich is a great mind, and you never know. I've even heard Eric Bieniemy's name being thrown out there. But I like the wild card that you're talking about with Kellen Moore. I really, really do like that a lot, Anthony. I do. And, everybody's looking for that young 30, 35-year-old guy. I'm not saying that these trendy picks are the right picks, but guess what? A lot of them are starting to occur. You're not seeing as many retreads as you have in the past.
We did see it work out last year with the Rams, though. Their head coach, I believe, is relatively young.
Well, you've got there's a trend with it. You got the Rams, the Buffalo Bills, and of course LaFleur isn't very old either. He's a long way from Social Security too. So, so with all due respect, the younger guys are part of it, but you're also seeing some older coach, and I believe Nagy is fairly young. So I can see that, but. But don't lose sight of the fact that Bill Callahan could definitely be a guy that gets an audition. Ironically, he replaced John Gruden over in Oakland. Now he's replacing Jay Gruden in Washington. When you talk about the ironies there, now whether that's long-term, I don't know. But to me, it's very entirely possible. So I don't know. I mean, some good points on Anthony.
I think what it may come down to in terms of Bill Callahan and whether he gets this job or not is what he does with Dwayne Haskins. Because from what I read, Gruden didn't necessarily want Haskins. It was actually the owner, Dan Snyder, who wanted him. So if Dan Snyder is that sold on Haskins, if Callahan isn't convinced by him and doesn't play him enough this season, that may hurt his chances of getting the role in the long run. If he's convinced that Colt McCoy or Case Keenum should be the starters this year, that may hurt his chances moving forward. That's going to be something to watch out for, I think, for the rest of the year.
Well, what I think is going to happen is this, okay? Callahan himself, who's a good offensive mind, will probably wait a week or two to see what Haskins does in practice. If the situation has gotten to the point where they're maybe 0-7, then I could see where the change would be made to put Haskins in, because at that point you have to find out what you're going to be doing in terms of preparing for the NFL draft next year. So, that's interesting. I think Callahan has now asserted himself as a head coach, and I could see a change being made in a couple of weeks. But you can't just give it to him right away until he's had a chance to work with him directly and he's calling the shots. What about you?
I mean,
absolutely.
So the Kellen Moore suggestion is fascinating. Given he is a former quarterback, and given since Kirk Cousins has left, I believe it was after the 2017 season, they've had somewhat of a stability problem at that position.
Right.
Could he work with Dwayne Haskins and solidify his position as the starter there? I think they'd love that, but I think they'd be even more interested in him if this start for the Cowboys and we did discuss how some of those early offensive outbursts were kind of, mitigated considering they've played some weak opponents. And again, they have a weak one in the Jets. If the Cowboys have a ridiculous offensive season and say they finish, top 3 in yards per game as an offense, he, in my opinion, could be that number one guy for that job. If Haskins, doesn't play or doesn't perform to his standards, I think, and if they don't address quarterback in the draft and they say they get Kellen Moore, this is all hypothetical, I mean, that would be a nice pairing for somebody who could really work with a guy like Haskins, who was terrific in his one full season at Ohio State.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. So, any other things you got for us, Anthony, before we talk about our next guest? I mean, obviously, you're going to have a lot of work to do. What I want you to do, though, is now that we've brought it up, is do some of your research about second-time opportunities for head coaches that didn't quite fare as well the first time. And then maybe what we'll do is do a pre-production thing sometime tomorrow or Thursday. How does that sound? I like that topic.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a topic we can certainly explore on Thursday night's edition of the Sports Exchange here on the South Florida Tribune Broadcasting Network.
Certainly. But yeah, one last topic I have to throw out there, of course, being a Texans reporter myself, I'm going to have to discuss that game. We'll see 53-32 over the Falcons. It was a fantastic performance from Houston's point of view. They got just shy of 600 yards on offense. Deshaun Watson had a perfect QB rating, 426 yards, 5 touchdowns. You look at Will Fuller, wide receiver, 14 receptions, 3 touchdowns, 217 yards. I mean, it was a ridiculous performance in terms of offense. Defense wasn't far from perfect from both teams, particularly obviously from the Falcons. And it's worrying from the Falcons' point of view because this was a particularly poor performance. How long is Dan Quinn going to last in that job? That's going to be something to keep a close eye out on because I know a lot of fans are calling for him to be fired at this point in time. So it's a tricky situation, to say the least, up in Atlanta. But as far as Houston's concerned, this puts them in great stead moving forward against the Chiefs this weekend, and Mahomes against Watson, both in the forms they're in. Obviously, Mahomes coming off of defeat, looking for that victory again with a slightly injured offensive line, and Watson looking like he's firing on all cylinders. That's going to be a very entertaining game this weekend.
Well, that's true. That's a good point, that Quinn could certainly be under fire, without a doubt. So, and for those individuals that had DeAndre Hopkins, it sounds like to me Will Fuller went ahead and took some of your fire, so to speak. So
he did, but Hopkins still had 88 yards on 7 receptions. It's not too bad. So, Will Fuller, though, with Hopkins getting so much attention, it's giving the likes of Fuller and even the tight ends, Darren Fells, a chance to really shine in that offense, and they're finally starting to figure it out.
That's true. All right, well, on that note, Anthony, go ahead and we'll talk about the next second act opportunities that we have. And now that you brought it up, I'll be curious to see when we compare our notes for Thursday's edition of the Sports Exchange. So, Anthony, well done, and we'll get ready to do it again in less than 48 hours. Okay, buddy?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much.
Me too. Thanks for being on the Sports Exchange. Anthony, appreciate that.
Take care, UK.
All right, UK.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right, our next guest here will be a guy that I've worked with for a long time, being a fellow Detroiter like I am, and that being Lynn Henning. He has been in covering sports for 45 years. He began his journalism career on August 5th, 1974. And with the Detroit News, he's been around quite a bit. So I think it's pretty amazing that, to me, I just think it's, to me, it's just unbelievable. It really is. So I actually, to me, looking forward to bringing it on. And for you being a young journalist, I think this will be a great opportunity for you to go ahead and
pick his brain a little bit,
without a doubt. So, but so obviously you get a steady diet of football like you really do. Mm-hmm. So, what are your thoughts about what we've seen so far?
I mean, the problem with the Falcons is primarily seen in their defense, though, and if I have it up here, they're 31st in total team defense. That's not going to win you a lot of games, and ever really since they blew that Super Bowl, Matt Ryan has still completed 66% of his passes, so he's doing his job. Obviously, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver out of Alabama, who I actually grew up with, went to school with Calvin Ridley, product of that Nick Saban system, has been terrific. 83 yards last week on 6 catches. He caught a touchdown. He's been on and off this year. Ryan's had a couple of problems targeting him, but primarily it's just that defense. They've really struggled all season long to, back a good offensive performance. It's kind of like what we see with the Saints. Breeze, even when he was putting up those magnificent offensive numbers, the defense was never really that terrific for him. And, we're seeing it again. The Saints, their defense here is ranked 22 out of 32 teams.
Right.
So they're a little bit less than middle of the road. Defense is important, and even in baseball, even in football, defense wins championships, right? You're not going to win a game if you're scoring 10 runs, but you're allowing 10 runs. or you're scoring 30 points like the Falcons did last week, and Deshaun Watson's, helping put up 52, 53 points. It's,
right.
A strong defense like the Patriots have, when Brady, who has still been good, he hasn't been great, as we have expected. They've kind of helped mitigate some of those, blunders, especially that game against the Bills, where they had 4 turnovers in that game. The Patriots defense has been terrific, and if the Falcons, want to even look at going to the playoffs this year, that's the issue they're going to have to address.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Again, the Atlanta Falcons, to me, are what they really, really are, and they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, can't disagree with you.
Once Kyle Shanahan left, I think the fortunes for the Atlanta Falcons, to me, really went south, and they went south very quickly. And what can and then of course Dan Quinn could be the guy who gets the fall for it, but guy, he's had a pretty good run in Atlanta. He really has had a good run.
If you can take a team to the Super Bowl, as difficult that is, it's difficult to win a Super Bowl, but it's pretty difficult to get there too. So.
Yeah, but he did get him to the Super Bowl,
and that means a lot, though. I mean, look at Tomlin; he's taken the Steelers when Roethlisberger's been there to 3 Super Bowls. So, we were talking earlier about the possibility of him leaving for the Redskins job. It's the same situation with Daniels. He's got a better chance of winning in Pittsburgh than he does, in Washington. I think Washington's a couple of years away. You're going to have to draft for him, maybe even trade some of the assets on that team. Adrian Peterson has been horrific thus far with them. He's nearing the end of his career.
Right.
Well, it looked like a bounce back last year, but.
Right.
We'll talk to Lynn.
Hello, Lynn. How you doing? Welcome to the Sports Exchange. Glad to have you with us, Lynn.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
All right. How are you doing? You're here with Louis Adio Weiss, my young aspiring co-host. Thanks for being on the show, Lynn. Appreciate
Sure,
you.
Sure, you bet. Absolutely.
So anyways, I told you when we talked last week that we have a young aspiring sports writer. But let's talk about our background, how you and I have worked in Detroit sports media. It's been a lot of fun, hasn't it? Seeing you at spring training and all the other events.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I was 12 years old, really, when I decided I was going to be a sports writer, or wanted to be. I grew up on a farm in the middle of the state of Michigan, and as I've always said, that will motivate you to want to do something different in your life real fast. But I decided I would get into that particular business. I liked newspapers, and I liked listening to not only sports games, but I love sports news. And I would tune into WJR and regularly consume that along with the Free Press every day. And it just, I loved everything, and I loved current events on all subjects. So that's what inspired me. I got into high school. I was editor of the high school paper, and then I got to Michigan State. I was sports editor of the paper at MSU, and then one thing leads to another. You get hired. I worked right out of college as a sports writer at the Battle Creek Enquirer. Good job for a first job. Yeah. Then went back to the Lansing State Journal for 3.5 years, then to the Detroit News in 79 when I was 26, and that was the story. So very blessed and very lucky.
Quite a ride with some of the writers that you had there. I love Joe Falls. Joe was unbelievable. I know that he's a guy that I thought so much of. And then you had Jerry Green, obviously, there for a long time. Mike O'Hara. The list goes on. You had quite a sports. And you know what? Even though Charlie Vincent, I think, worked at the Free Press, if I remember right.
Right, Charlie, good friend for a lot of years, still a good friend. Met him when I was at Michigan State. He was just a great cohort.
Right.
We could go on and on and on. Kurt Sylvester, Jim Hawkins.
Oh, yeah.
The list is endless. And so, yes, it was a very fortunate job and vocation for a guy that really, really wanted to do that in his life.
Okay. Well, since we have a young pup here sitting next to me, as much as you and I can reminisce all day long on the phone, this might be a good opportunity for Louis to pick your brain a little bit, Lynn.
Well, that's fine. Absolutely happy to
so
answer any question.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Lucy.
I kind of want to do a comparison, given that you have so many years of experience. You said you were 12 years old when you found out. You said, you know what,